Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the elite members of the channel. Thank you all so much for your continued and dedicated support. It means a lot, and I am truly grateful for your presence here on Back to Ashes. Without further ado, it is now time to go back to ashes, for once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Now, it's time to sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for today's dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Eerie Appalachian Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad, and after that, there will be no more ads within this video. I've always been haunted by the shadows of history, the kind that linger in the cracks of old stories, whispering truths too dark to face. At 30, I'm a researcher of American crime, digging through archives of forgotten horrors. But nothing prepared me for the Harp brothers, America's first serial killers, whose blood-soaked trail through the fledgling United States still chills me. Their story isn't just a tale of murder. It's a descent into a primal evil that feels alive, watching from the edges of the Appalachian wilderness. Let me tell you how I uncovered their legacy, felt their presence in the dark, and learned a truth that makes my skin crawl. It started in a dusty library in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I was sifting through Revolutionary War records for a project. A yellow journal tucked in a mislabeled box caught my eye. Scrawled notes from a militia captain in 1799, detailing the hunt for Micaiah and Wiley Harp, born around 1748 and 1750. Sons of Scottish Tories that settled in Orange County, North Carolina in the 1760s. Staunch loyalists, they tried to join the Patriot militia during the Revolution, likely as spies, but were rejected for their Tory ties. That rejection, the captain wrote, lit a fire of hate in them, a hunger for blood. They joined a band of loyalist outlaws, preying on patriot farmers, sexually assaulting, burning, and killing with a zeal that shocked even their allies. By 1781, their British defeat at Yorktown, the Harps fled to the Appalachian Mountains, hiding with Cherokee in a village called Nickajack. From there, they launched revenge raids, slaughtering settlers in Nashville, ambushing Daniel Boone's men in Blue Licks. When Boone burned Nickajacks, the brothers vanished into Powell's Valley, stealing to survive, their bitterness festering. In 1797, they began their true campaign of murder. A man named Johnson crossed their path while they hunted. They gutted him, filling his chest with stones, and defiled his corpse. I read the captain's words, my hands trembling. No reason but sport. No mercy but cruelty. I couldn't stop. I followed their trail through archives, piecing together their horrors. In Kentucky, they beat a salesman, Peyton, to death for praising the new republic, disemboweling and defiling him. 2 Maryland travelers were tortured, one forced to watch the other's deaths, their bodies stuffed with rocks. A Virginian, John Langford, met the same fate. The Harps were caught in Danville, but escaped, strangling a guard with their shackles. In revenge, they slaughtered the young son of a posse member, leaving his body as a warning. Governor James Garrett's $300 bounty in 1799 only fueled their paranoia, leading to 5 more killings. Travelers mistaken for bounty hunters, mutilated without cause. I drove to Cumberland Gap, where they'd roam needing to fill the land they cursed. The forest was too quiet, the air thick with a weight I couldn't name. At dusk, I stood where Peyton's body was found, the ridge looming like a judge. A rustle in the bush made me freeze. Nothing there, but I felt eyes, heavy and old. Back in my motel, I read of their time with Samuel Mason's river pirates in Illinois. Even Mason, a hardened outlaw, expelled them for their depravity, shoving a naked hostage off a cliff, laughing as he screamed. In Tennessee, they killed a farmer, Bradbury, a man named Hardin, and a boy named Coffee, for no reason, but their own twisted joy. A family of 5, including an infant girl, fell to their axes, Wiley later confessing he'd smashed her head against a tree to silence her cries. The posse grew, 100 men driven by vengeance. In Muhlenberg County, they cornered the brothers as they prepared to ambush a settler. Micaiah was shot in the leg, unable to flee. He confessed to 20 murders before Moses Stegall, grieving a slaughtered family, severed his head with a bow tie knife. Still alive, the head was nailed to a tree at a crossroads that is now called Harp's Head Road. Wiley escaped, rejoined Mason's gang, but was hanged in 1804. His head staked along the Natchez Trace. I thought the story ended there, a grim chapter closed. But that night in my motel, the air grew cold, the lights flickering. I heard it, 3 slow knocks on my window. Though I was on the 3rd floor, my laptop, open to the captain's journal, glitched, the screen flashing a single phrase, "We see you." I slammed it shut, heart pounding, but the knocks came again, deliberate, like a countdown. I didn't sleep, staring at the window, expecting a face, pale, eyeless, smiling. The next morning, I found a package outside my door. There was no address to it. There wasn't a note. Instead, inside was a rusted knife, crusting with something dark and a scrap of paper, old as the journal, inked in jagged script. 51. I never told anyone I was researching the harps, but last night I heard these knocks again, closer, inside my apartment. The knife was on my desk, though. I'd locked it away. They're not gone. They're watching, counting, and I feel like I'm next on their list. The summer between my sophomore and junior year of college, I set out with my study buddy, now my best friend for life, to hike the Vermont section of the Appalachian Trail. The forest felt alive, its shadows whispering secrets as we trekked through the dense green of Glastonbury Mountain. We'd hiked together before, toughing out rough trails. So, by day 3, our spirits were high, our laughter echoing through the trees. But something waited for us out there. Something that turned the air cold and made my skin crawl. Let me tell you how it felt to stumble into a nightmare and the truth that still haunts me. It was early afternoon, the sky heavy with a threat of rain, when my friend froze mid-step, her fingernail pointing off trail. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. Through the trees about 20 yards away, a flash of red dangled from a branch, vivid against the muted greens and browns. It looked like a shirt, carelessly tossed, and we barely muttered about litter bugs who leave their trash in the wilderness. "Let's grab it," I said, half annoyed, half curious, thinking we'd toss it in a bin back in town. We veered off the path, the underbrush snagging at our boots, the air growing thicker, like the forest was holding its breath. As we got closer, the red cloth sharpened into focus. A shirt, yes, but not discarded. It hung deliberately, pinned to the branch like a signal. My stomach twisted as I saw what lay beneath. 2 shallow, rectangular pits in the dirt, side by side, unmistakably shaped like graves. Empty but too neat, too intentional. My friend's eyes met mine, wide with the same thought. There were 2 graves, and there were 2 of us. The forest went silent. No birds, no wind, just the pounding of my heart. We didn't touch the shirt. We didn't speak. We just turned and bolted down the Glastonbury Trail, our packs slamming against our backs. Every snap of a twig behind us felt like pursuit. We didn't stop until we hit Bennington, our breaths ragged as we found a payphone to call 911. I spilled everything to the sheriff, my voice shaking as I described the graves, the red shirt, the eerie stillness. He listened, his tone calm but serious, and gave us his direct number to check it later. "You did the right thing," he said, but his words didn't ease the chill in my bones. My friend wanted to keep hiking, to skip ahead and catch a ride to the next trailhead, but I couldn't. "What if those aren't the only graves?" I said, my voice low. "What if someone's out there, waiting, with more holes ready?" The image burned in my mind, a faceless figure, shovel in hand, watching from the trees. We agreed to stay in a motel that night, to call the sheriff again in the morning. If he found a harmless explanation, we'd continue. If not, I was done. The next day, I called. The sheriff hadn't checked the site yet, but he promised he would. His casual tone grated, like he didn't grasp the weight of what we'd seen. My friend was furious, her dream of hiking the Vermont Trail crumbling. But I couldn't go back. This wasn't some prank, like Blair Witch stick figures dangling for laughs. Those graves were dug with purpose. The shirt a lure, a trap. Someone had spent time, too much time, crafting that scene. I wasn't betting my life on it being a joke. We packed up, caught a ride home, the forest's shadow clinging to us like damp rot. Back home, I tried to shake it off, but the memory of those graves gnawed at me. I called the sheriff a week later. He found the site. 2 shallow pits, a red shirt still hanging. "Kids, probably," he said. "Some dumb prank." No one was arrested. No leads followed. I wanted to believe him, but at night, I'd lay awake, imagining footsteps outside my window, the glint of eyes in the dark. I told myself it was over, that I'd left the horror on the trail. But what makes my blood freeze the most? Months later, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a scrap of red cloth, frayed and stained, smelling faintly of earth and pine. Tucked beside it was a photo of me and my friend on the trail, taken from a distance through the trees. Our faces clear, unaware, scrawled on the back in jagged script. 2 more. I never heard her. I burned the cloth, the photo, but I still heard it. A faint scraping, like a shovel in dirt, under my floorboards at night. Someone's still out there, digging, waiting, and they know where I live. I've always been pulled to the Appalachian Mountains, their jagged peaks and shallowed hollows whispering of a world just out of reach. There's a beauty here, but it's laced with a chill that clings to your skin, a feeling that the land is watching, waiting. Last summer, I convinced 2 friends to hike with me to Holly River State Park in West Virginia, chasing rumors of an ancient family cemetery hidden on a ridge. We had only a vague sense of its location, a winding trail through thick undergrowth, up a steep climb to a forgotten graveyard. What I didn't expect was the darkness that would follow us, the way it would sink into my bones and leave me questioning what's real. We piled into my car at dawn, and the 3 of us buzzing with a nervous excitement. The drive was too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you joke about monsters lurking just out of sight. My stomach churned, a mix of too much coffee and a creeping unease I couldn't name. When we reached the parking lot near the trailhead held a few cars, but no people. The place felt abandoned. The air was heavy with a hush that swallowed our footsteps. I tried to focus on the mossy stones, the towering hardwoods, the faint chirp of a bird. But something was off, like the forest was holding its breath, sizing us up. We started hiking at around noon, the overcast sky casting a sickly silver glow through the branches. The trail was clear at first, and we chatted to fill the silence. But the deeper we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no breeze, just the crunch of our boots and the occasional scuttle in the brush. Squirrels, maybe, but always gone when I looked. My friend muttered that the woods felt like they were judging us, and I didn't argue. We left the main trail, following a half-forgotten path toward the cemetery, pushing through dense thickets that clawed at my arms. The land felt raw, ancient, like it resented our presence. Hours in, the terrain grew treacherous, loose stones threatening to send us sliding down the ridge. We nearly missed the cemetery, spotting it only when a warped iron gate glinted in the corner of my friend's eye. The graveyard was a cluster of crooked tombstones, their names eroded to whispers, buried in weeds and decay. It felt wrong, oppressive, like the air was thicker here, pressing against my chest. We wandered, snapping photos, brushing aside vines, but every rustle of leaves made my pulse spike. A musty smell, damp earth, rotting leaves hung in the air, and the wind carried faint whispers, too soft to make out. I told myself it was my imagination, but my hands shook as I held my phone. We stayed too long, caught in the eerie pull of a place forgotten by time, until the sun began to sink, painting the ridge in bruised oranges and purples. We hadn't planned to hike at night, but dusk was closing in fast. The thought of navigating the forest in the dark twisted my gut, so we decided to take the park's main road back to the campground. A longer route, but safer. Leaving the cemetery felt like escaping a trap, but the relief was fleeting. The path to the road was a gauntlet of roots and branches that snagged at us, snapping twigs, echoing like warnings. I kept glancing over my shoulder, sure something was following, but saw only shadows. When we broke through the tree line and hit the asphalt, I exhaled, thinking we'd made it. But the road was empty, stretching into the twilight with no cars, no people, just a silence that felt alive, predatory. We walked, the darkness deepening, the trees on either side looming like centennials. My friend tried to joke, "We're the last people on Earth," but her voice fell flat. The air grew heavier, carrying that same earthy, decayed smell from the cemetery. Then we saw them, 5 figures, silhouetted against the fading light, standing motionless in the middle of the road. Relief flickered. I wasn't alone out here, but it died when they didn't move, didn't respond to our waves or timid "Hays." As we got closer, their shapes stayed vague, like smudges in the twilight. No faces, no details. They were silent, not a whisper or shuffle, just there. My skin prickled, a primal fear clawing at me. Then, one by one, they flickered, like a bad signal, and vanished. The road was empty, the asphalt untouched. No footprints, no sign they'd ever been. We stood frozen, our flashlights cutting through the dark, calling out to nothing. There was nowhere they could have gone. A sheer drop on one side, a jagged rock slope on the other. My mind raced. Hallucination? Trick of the light? But we'd seen all of them, felt their presence. Heavy and wrong. The smell came back, stronger, like wet graves, and I swear I heard a faint hum, like voices just out of reach. We moved fast after that, our steps too loud, our breaths ragged. Every shadow seemed to pulse, every rustle a threat. The campground, when we reached it, was dead quiet. No campfires, no voices, just our car in a pool of moonlight. We scrambled inside, locking the doors, my friend gunning the engine as we tore out of the park. I kept checking the rear view, expecting those figures to rise from the trees. We didn't talk much on the drive, too shaken to do more than whisper. We tossed around explanations, exhaustion, low light, locals playing a prank. But nothing fit. Those figures hadn't just walked away. They dissolved. Days later, I couldn't sleep. Their shapes burned into my mind, flickering like ghosts. I'd heard Appalachian tales, phantom hikers, lights in the woods, but never believed them. Now I wasn't sure. Something had happened on that road. Something I couldn't explain. A month later, I found an old book on Holly River in a thrift store. Its pages had yellowed, smelling of mildew. Tucked inside was a grainy photo dated 1892 of 5 men standing on a ridge, their faces blurred, their shapes eerily familiar. The caption read, "Lost to the ridge, never found." I burned the book, but that night, I woke to the same decayed smell, the hum louder and closer. My bedroom door creaked open, and in the moonlight, I saw them, 5 shapes, flickering, watching. They didn't vanish this time. They stepped closer, and the last thing I heard was my own name, whispered from the dark. I always thought my grandpa's childhood in Greatfield, Virginia was a postcard dream. 4 quiet streets, cradling a creek, the Appalachian Trail spilling out just beyond the old logging patches. A place where small town values and tight-knit neighbors promised an idyllic upbringing, with the great green forest as a boundless backyard. That's what I imagined. But the truth was a shadow that clung to Greatfield, a darkness that made my skin crawl when Grandpa told me why he fled that town the first chance he got. It wasn't just the Great Depression, though that's what they claimed. Something far older and more sinister festered there, a curse woven into its soil, its trees, its very breath. Before the Civil War, Greatfield was a prosperous speck, split by 2 plantation families at opposite ends of the holler. One built their wealth on slaves, employing white townsfolk as overseers and clerks. The other, abolitionists, paid their workers fairly, white and black alike. As the nation's tensions boiled, so did Greatfield. Polite debates turned into venomous glares, then bullets. The slaveholders' deep pockets hired thugs who intimidated, beat, or killed. Abolitionists fought back, but they were outnumbered. Their barns became gallows. Their families fled north or vanished. By war's end, the slave owners had won, or so they thought. The Federals' arrival changed everything. The slaveholders clung to their plantation through cunning deals, but their empire crumbled without free labor. The new head, the old patriarch's drunk son, was a tyrant who treated workers like property, their homes like his playground, their wives like his conquests. Whispers of his violations spread, each a spark in a town primed to burn. One night, after a woman stumbled home, trembling, claiming he'd forced himself on her, the townsfolk snapped. A mob, fueled by whiskey and rage, marched to the plantation house. Their torches cast jagged shadows, their faces twisted with something beyond justice, something primal, wrong. They didn't hang the owner. They nailed the doors and windows shut, trapping everyone: maids, cooks, nannies, children. Bullets meant anyone who neared an exit. Then, with a sickening roar, they set the house ablaze. The mob cheered as flames climbed, but their laughter died when the screams began. High, desperate wails of women and children clawing at the walls. One man tried to pry open a window, but the other stopped him. No witnesses, they hissed. It had to look like an accident. The authorities bought the lie. No one hung, but the truth seeped out, whispered to wives, confessed to preachers, muttered on deathbeds. A darkness settled over Greatfield, thicker than the smoke that choked the sky that night. The town's economy collapsed. Suspicion poisoned every glance, and guilt drove men to drink, breaking homes and lives. Folks called it a curse, not a ghost story, but a weight of blood and shame. In 1934, a hunter named Hiram Carter stumbled onto the speakeasy on Apple Lane, hands shaking as he downed a beer and whiskey. His eyes were wild, his voice a whisper. He'd been in his blind, waiting for a buck, when something spooked it. A shape, too fast, too wrong. Not a bear, not a dog, but something big, lean, and aware. It stalked him back to his truck, just out of sight. He warned everyone to stay out of the woods. They laughed. Hiram was known for tall tales, but a week later, two girls came screaming into town, their biggle cowering. They'd been near the old plantation grounds where the charred bones of the big house lay under wild grass. Their dog growled. Then they saw it, a shaggy, huge thing creeping on all fours. It rose on its hind legs, watching with a twisted, hairless muzzle. They ran, the creature loping after them, hurting them, their dogs barking, biding them time. The town listened now. Rufus Robinson, their best hunter, went after it with a shepherd, vowing to bring back its head. 3 days later, his dog limped back alone, collapsing on a neighbor's porch. Rufus was gone. A hunting party of 6 men set a trap with fresh meat. Hours passed. Then it came, a blur of claws and teeth, nearly ripping a man's arm off before he knifed it. The others fired until it stopped moving. Under their lanterns, it wasn't a bear. It was a man, or what was left of one. His body was filthy, his hair and beard shaggy. Burn scars twisted his face, chest, and shoulders, robbing him of humanity. His spine was hunched, his hands and feet like paws, fingers tipped with jagged claws. The doctor, who served grapefields since the 1870s, recognized him. He was the plantation owner's youngest son, a boy who'd crawled from a cellar grate the night the mob burned his family alive. One man had let him go, unable to shoot a child. He'd survived in the woods, decade after decade, living like a beast. The scars were from the fire, but his feral movements, running on all fours, were something else. Grief and isolation, some said. Others whispered he'd been born wrong, a monster before the fire. Grandpa's voice dropped as he told me. His parents swore it to be true. The boy's death was another unpunished murder. His father said that boy didn't survive the fire. Killing him just finished what started that night. The curse was the town itself, its people carrying their ancestors' sins. But then Grandpa paused, his hands trembling, eyes confessing a secret. The doctor, on his deathbed, had revealed something else. The boy's scars weren't just burns. Hidden under the filth were deliberate marks, carved like ruins in a pattern from old forbidden books. The boy hadn't just survived. He'd found something in the woods, where it had found him. Something ancient, thriving on grape-filled guilt, feeding its curse. And when the hunters killed him, they didn't end it. They set it free. I've always been drawn to the shadows of the Appalachian Mountains, their peaks cloaked in mist and secrets. Growing up, I heard tales of the Mothman, a red-eyed specter haunting disaster's edge, or the Flatwoods Monster, whispered to be an alien visitor. But it was the moon-eyed people that sank their claws into me, a legend that felt too real as I wandered the trails near Fort Mountain, Georgia. Let me tell you how it felt to uncover the truth, to feel their eyes on me in the dark, and to learn something that makes my blood run cold. I was hiking alone one moonlit night, the forest humming with a life you can't see. The air was heavy, the trees leaning in like they were listening. I'd heard stories from old-timers, tales of the moon-eyed people, imp-like creatures, 4 feet tall, with ghostly pale skin and eyes like polished silver, too big for their skulls. They shun daylight, creeping out under the moon, skittish but watching. Most called it a folklore, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered in these woods. Something not of our world. My obsession began with a story from 1782, when John Sevier visited Cherokee Chief Oconostota at Fort Mountain. I read it in dusty library books, piecing together fragments that felt like nightmares. Oconostota, 90 and wise, told Sevier how his ancestors came from the Great Lakes, finding Appalachia claimed by a strange race. They were white men from across the Great Sea, pale as bone, with eyes that drank the night. The Cherokee called them the Moon-Eyed People, nocturnal hunters who terrified even the bravest warriors. They'd built a fortress on the mountain, its stone walls still standing, jagged and wrong. The Cherokee fought a brutal war to drive them out, thinking they'd won. Sevier, skeptical, promised to return with a historian. But Oconostota died that winter, taking his secrets. I stood on Fort Mountain near those stone walls, feeling a chill that wasn't the wind. The rocks looked too precise, like they held something in or out. The locals swore the Moon-Eyed People were gone, but the story spread across every Cherokee band, consistent in their horror. Small, pale creatures with bulbous eyes living underground, hunting in the dark. I found Benjamin Smith Barton's book, quoting Colonel Leonard Marbury, who said the Cherokee found the land possessed by certain moon-eyed people who couldn't see by day and were driven out in a bloody war. Barton thought they might be French settlers, their alien weapons just hoes and axes. But the Cherokee's descriptions, stunned, nocturnal, gleaming eyes, felt too primal. James Adair, an Irish trader who lived amongst the tribes for 40 years, confirmed it in a History of the American Indians. Every tribe knew of the Moon-Eyed People, described as pale, small, and cave-dwelling. Adair believed they lived underground, their bodies warped by centuries in the dark, adapted to see what we couldn't. I thought of this as I hiked, my flashlight cutting through the night, my heart pounding at every rustle. What if they were real, watching from the shadows? Science offered a clue. In 2003, archaeologists found the Little Lady of Flores, a Homo floresiensis, barely 3 feet tall, in an Indonesian cave. Her skull was small, her eyes likely large for her subterranean life. If the Cherokee arrived 12,000 years ago, they could have met a similar race hiding in caves. A genocidal war, they said, wiped them out. But in those woods, I felt dread. What if some survived, retreating deeper, their hatred festering? One night, camping near Fort Mountain under a full moon, I heard a twig snap, too deliberate. My flashlight caught nothing, but the air grew thick. Then I heard it, a scuttle, like bare feet on stone, and a low guttural hum. Not human and not animal. My skin crawled as my beam landed on two glints, like coins staring from the underbrush. They were eyes, too large, too still. I froze, and they vanished. I didn't sleep. My knife clutched tight, every shadow a threat. The next day, I found tracks near my camp, small, human-like, with clawed toes digging deep. They led to a cave mouth, half hidden by vines, its darkness swallowing my light. I didn't go in. I felt a presence, ancient and patient, watching me leave. I thought I'd escaped. But here's what wakes me, sweating in the night. At home, unpacking my gear, I found a stone in my bag. Smooth, pale, carved with an eye. Its pupils slit like a cat's. It wasn't mine. It was a message. They'd seen me, followed me, left their mark. And late at night, I hear it. A scuttle under the floorboards. A hum beyond the walls. They're not gone. They're here, waiting, and they know my name. I grew up in Bakersfield, North Carolina, a speck of a town 16 miles from the Tennessee line, where the Appalachian Trail snakes into the Great Smokies and Pisgah National Forest. The air here feels heavy with something ancient, something in the trees, the hills, the water, that seeps into your bones. Appalachians are superstitious, more than anyone I've met. My grandmother swore dimples on a chin were the devil's footprints. Outnumbered eggs meant doom. Washing clothes on Sunday invited curses. She wore a buckeye in her bra to fend off rheumatism, believed in black magic with chilling fervor. Down here, the otherworldly feels close, a shadow you can't shake. So when my friend Scott told me about a witch on Rattlesnake Ridge, I didn't laugh it off entirely. I was 12, Scott was 13, when he swore his cousin had seen her. A witch in a shack, cursing 4 men to death after the war. I called his cousin a liar, but dared Scott to take me there. One Saturday, we hiked to the ridge, an hour through the woods we knew well. I'd learned to tread heavy to scare off rattlers, but as the ridge loomed, a prickle ran down my neck. Scoot said the shack was on the southeastern side, that we'd smell her fire. A fire where she cooked children's flesh and made bone terms. I scoffed, expecting to prove him wrong. Then we smelled it. Acrid, metallic smoke. Scoot hissed. I told you. My stomach twisted. I didn't believe in witches, but that smell hit like a ghost story come alive. I needed to prove I wasn't scared. We pushed through wax myrtles, branches clawing at us, and saw it. A sagging log cabin, its chimney belching sickly smoke. A broom leaned by the door, herbs and bone charms dangling like warnings. Scoot whispered, "You believe me now?" My heart pounded, but I wasn't convinced. Not yet. The door cracked open, and she stepped out. The witch of Rattlesnake Ridge. Her hair was patchy white, her back stooped, her face wart-crusted. I froze, cursing myself for doubting Scoot. He blurted, "There she is." Her eyes glinted like wet stones. "Who's there?" she croaked. "Show yourselves." We ran, branches tearing at us, convinced she'd cursed us to die, like those 4 men. We split up, vowing to beg our parents for help. I stumbled home, fighting tears, and told my mom everything, how we trespassed, how we were doomed. My parents said there were no witches, just Dora Ann, an old woman wanting peace. She'd yelled because we startled her. They called Scoot's mom, who said the same. We weren't cursed, just idiots. On the phone, Scoot and I laughed, relief washing away fear. At school, we bragged, shrugging off kids who insisted she'd hexed us. Their parents confirmed it. No curse, just a lonely woman, and the 4 men's deaths were accidents. But in 2004, in a Burnsville bar, Scoot and I learned the truth. An old man overheard us reminiscing about the witch, bought us beers, and said he'd tell us why she lived alone, and why one of those men was her husband. I laughed, joking about broomsticks, but he shut me down. "Sit your ass down," he growled, "and hear why one was her goddamn husband." Dora Ann Quinlan married James Cranewell in 1941. They were happy until Pearl Harbor, when James was drafted. In 1942, he was reported massacred in North Africa. Dora Ann mourned, but by 1943, she was with a grocery clerk. No one judged her, but she kept it secret. By 1944, it was an open secret, and folks hoped for a wedding. In 1946, a telegram said James was alive, liberated from a death camp, skeletal. He came home a hero. But Dora Ann couldn't end her affair. One night, drunk, James caught them in bed. He beat the clerk, tied him up, and assaulted Dora Ann, forcing his buddies to join in. They shot the clerk in the woods, hid the body. James locked Dora Ann up, then kicked her out. She told the sheriff, but James denied it. Without evidence, there was no case. The town knew. Corpse hounds sniffed a body's trail near Rattlesnake Bridge, but it vanished. Dora Ann sank into despair at her parents' home. Months later, James' house burned down, likely with him inside. One buddy crashed into a tree. Another died from poisoned whiskey. The state patrol found no witnesses. The fire was arson, the others accidents. Dora Ann smiled, started walking the ridge, searching where the hounds lost the scent. She never stopped until she didn't come home. Someone found her cabin, hidden, refurbished. She'd chosen to live there, searching for her lover's body, far from a town that failed her. The witch rumors kept kids quiet, shrouding the truth in myth. A year later, I hiked to her cabin, finding a faded photo of Dora Ann and the clerk, scratched with a pupil symbol, and "We are one." That night, I dreamed of her, pale, eyes too large, whispering, "He's with me now." I woke up to a hum like rattling bones and found that symbol carved into my bedpost. She wasn't alone. Something else was with her, watching me still. I've never been one to scare easily, but 3 years ago, a job in Blue Hollow, a remote stretch of forest in the Appalachian Mountains, broke something in me. As a wildlife technician, I thought I'd seen it all. Bear scat, bobcat dens, hog trails. But nothing prepared me for what awaited me in that snow-choked wilderness. The memory clings to me like damp rot, and the truth I uncovered still wakes me, sweating in the dark. Let me tell you how it felt to be hunted, to see something that shouldn't exist, to learn a secret that's worse than death. The gig was simple, a 3-month winter post monitoring predator activity. A solo job, just me, a cabin, a snowmobile, and a map. I didn't ask questions. How remote? How rough? Where's the nearest town? I just needed out of Knoxville. away from the wreckage of my life. The cabin was a 4-hour slog off the nearest paved road, buried in mountains that felt like they resented my presence. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just a ham radio bolted to the wall and a generator that sputtered like it was cursed. The place sagged, its tin roof creaking, the door warped, the wood stove coughing black smoke. I didn't care. I unpacked, loaded my gear, and started my survey routes, tracking prints, setting traps, logging data. The first weeks were cold but predictable, the isolation almost comforting. I liked the routine. Up before dawn, out on the snowmobile, back by dark, log, eat, sleep. Then, in week 4, the forest turned on me. I'd set a foothold trap near a ravine, but when I checked it, it was gone. Not tripped, not dragged, just vanished. The stake, driven deep in frozen dirt, had been twisted out. Metal wrapped like someone had wrenched it with bare hands. In the snow, I saw prints. Huge, barefoot, human-shaped, but wrong. Splayed toes, a lopping stride. No boots, no blood. They led deeper into the woods, where the trees grew too close, their branches clawing at the sky. The air felt heavy, humming with a silence that wasn't natural. I left a warning note in a plastic bag, pinned to a branch. Do not disturb. Wildlife survey. By morning, it was gone. Bag, note, everything. That's when the shadows started. Fleeting shapes darted behind the trees, too fast to catch, too tall to be animals. Shadows stretched where they shouldn't, bending against the light. I told myself it was fatigue, the cold playing tricks, but the quiet grew worse. No coyotes howling, no wind, just a void that pressed against my eardrums. The tracks came back, almost barefoot, circling closer to the cabin. One morning, they were right outside the door, another by the snowmobile. I found coarse, greasy hair snatched on a branch by the porch, reeking of something sour and alive. I brought my rifle inside, locked the door, and started sleeping with one eye open. Then, the tapping began. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Then again. Sometimes on the windows, sometimes the wall behind my cot, once on the roof. I sat up nights, rifle across my lap, every creak amplified in the dark. One morning, I found a doll tied to the door handle, sticks bound with sinew, damp, like it had been in a mouth. No face, just limbs, crude and wrong. I burned it in the snow, the smoke stinging my eyes, but that night, the tapping was faster, frantic. The roof groaned, footsteps pacing above. Slow, deliberate, too heavy for an animal. I didn't sleep. A few nights later, the snowmobile, 600 pounds of steel, was flipped over, half buried in snow. I called headquarters on the radio, my voice shaking, saying something was stalking me. They said a storm had blocked the roads. No one could come for 10 days. Stay inside, keep logging, they said, like I was whining about a raccoon. That night, I boiled water for tea, trying to steady my nerves, when the taps came again. Back window. I crept over, heart hammering, and parted the curtain. A face stared back, not outside, but reflected in the glass. Inside. Long, pale, with hollow black eyes and a wide, still mouth that somehow smiled. I didn't blink. I stumbled back, rifle raised, and when I looked again, it was gone. At dawn, I stepped outside. Fresh snow, clean, except for footprints. Dozens, all size, all barefoot, circling the cabin in loops, some dragging, like the limbs were twisted or jointed wrong. I should have stayed put, but I followed the freshest trail, down a slope in uncharted woods. The trees closed in, moss-covered, the air thick and sour. In a clearing, it squatted in the snow, waiting. Long limbs folded, skin gray, rough like bark, pelt, deer, raccoon, fox, hanging from its arms, sewn or stuck. It stood, 8 feet tall, its face not human, eyes too dark, no nose, mouth too wide. It whistled, a low, bone-deep note that hit me like grief, like it knew me. My eyes burned. I was crying, backing away, rifle useless in my hands. I ran. Back at the cabin, I locked everything, shuttered the windows, killed the lights. I didn't eat, barely drank, just waited 10 days. Rifle clutched, jumping at every sound. When the snowplow came, I demanded reassignment, permanent. They didn't ask why. I've never gone back and never will. Last month, I discovered something that made my blood freeze. I found a package at my door. No address, no note. Inside was a stick doll like the one I burned, but this time it had a face. Carved, pale with hollow eyes and a wide, smiling mouth. Tucked beside it was a photo of me taken that winter, standing by the cabin unaware. Scrawled on the back, "You were known." At night, I hear it. 3 taps, slow and deliberate, on my apartment window. 10 floors up. It's not gone. It followed me, and it's waiting to claim what it knows. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true eerie Appalachian stories. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the rest of the membership and new listeners to the channel. For the rest of the membership, thank you so much. Your support means more to me than the world. To the new listeners, thank you so much for sticking around and supporting Back to Ashes. You are more than welcome here. And as I always say, without all of you, I wouldn't have a voice and there would be no Back to Ashes. I thank you for your support. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. In the meantime, stay vigilant and please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.